I feel pretty, oh so pretty, oh so pretty and witty and gay. Shut-a-ba-da-bum, shut-a-ba-da-bum, shut-a-ba-da-bum. Uh-uh. Remix. Wow. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Julio Show. Today, we got a great guest on, a great friend that I met through our Maxwell Leadership Program, who does a lot in the community and a lot to service many people. She's an entrepreneur. Uh, she's on the Maxwell Executive Team. She's also a behavior analyst. Uh, she's an expert in team building. She's a leadership coach. She's a mom. We can go on with all the great things that she does, but she's going to explain it to us today. Welcome, Tessa Hampton. How are you?
I'm doing well, my friend. It's so nice to see you.
Nice to see you, and thank you for being on the show today.
Of
I know
course.
you have so many great things to offer, but I know you do a lot of team building. I mean, your expertise is in pulling teams together, which is sometimes the most difficult thing to do in the whole world. And how do you bring such dysfunction back to function? So tell me a little bit more about what you do and why you do it, because for me, it's like, oh my God, you people, but we do it anyway, don't we? So
Yes, yes. People are fun, right? We're so different. And I remember hearing once someone said, business would be easy if there weren't people in the mix. So it just, but we can't get rid of us. Yeah. So really, like you were saying, I working with teams is just, it's the one thing that really brings me joy. And it comes down to helping them understand one another. I don't know about you, but feeling misunderstood is probably the worst feeling
hmm
that you can have,
I'm
right?
misunderstood quite a bit,
I think a lot of us are. I think a lot of us are. Yeah.
especially if you
And
got a language barrier, right? You
yes,
misunderstand what you're saying, but
yes. Language barrier. Sometimes it's, you're not reading someone the way they, meant to come across, or really it's just as basic as we have our own filters and lenses that we tend to take in other people's communication or other people's actions. And so that's why I work with teams, that I really want to help them understand one another so that we can release the judgment and we can, stop attaching things to what people are saying and doing that don't have to be there.
yeah. How do you do that though? Because like you said, you got different personalities, you got
Mhm.
different behaviors, and then you're going to mix these two people together. It's like lightning and thunder, or I don't know, oil and water. It just
Yeah.
separates. So how do you go into an organization where not everybody, but some people just want to attack other people and they just can't seem to complete each other. They just compete. How do you do
Yeah.
that?
Well, and it's interesting because you also work with DISC, you're a behavior analyst as well, right? You have the training. It really comes down to people, first of all, being willing to want to understand themselves. It has to start with ourselves. It's so easy to look at everyone else around us and think it's their problem, right? Julio's not understanding me because he's got the problem, or Tessa doesn't understand me because she's got the problem. But it starts with us wanting to understand ourselves first and figure out, okay, well, where am I maybe the problem? And so when you're coming into an organization, when I'm coming into an organization, the first thing I want them to understand is that they're all unique and they're all different and they all have amazing gifts and strengths and they all belong on this team. But if we're not creating a space where everyone feels confident enough or they trust their teams enough to be able to show up as they are, then you're never going to get to this understanding piece. So it's really, trust is a huge part of it. Understanding is a huge part of it. Dropping some of your guard, maybe, right? We all have our masks on, and just being comfortable to be able to show up and say, okay, what can I do differently so I can help my teammates feel a little bit more comfortable here.
How do you restore that trust in people? Because there are people that don't even trust themselves, and as you said, it
Mhm.
starts with you, right?
Mhm.
Um, but one of the biggest issue I see with a lot of people is trust. So how can we open that door up? What is the I don't know, do you have the magic ingredients to create or help create trust?
It's interesting, right? Because trust is, it seems like it takes a lot of time for people to build that. And then in a second, it's gone. And so trust is that funny thing. I mean, some people will say, well, you should trust really quickly, and until someone gives you a reason not to trust them, then you just trust them. But other people will have the perspective of, you need to earn my trust, and so I'm not going to trust you until. Now, I'm not here to judge which one's right or wrong, but I think at the end of the day, you need to get to know that human in front of you. You know, when we talk to teams, when I work with teams, most of them, it's very service. It's about work. You come to work and it's just work. And I think if you're going to build trust with people, you need to peel back the layers as to who is that person I'm working with, right? Get to know the human that's at work with you. Get to know maybe their fears, get to know a bit about their family, get to know their loves, get to know what they loathe. And the more you get to know the person, I think the more you can build trust, because they're no longer just someone you go to work with, but they're a real human with the same fears and struggles and joys and, gifts. And the more you know that, the more I see teams opening up and being able to trust one another. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah,
a lot
I
of
think it's
people
just vulnerability.
yeah, because a lot of people go to work and they got that attitude was, I'm not here to make friends. Here to
Hmm.
work. And that's not true because when you go to work, you have to love the people you're working with, and you're
Yeah.
right, you have to accept them. Um, but why is it that we were fed this our whole life, or is it just today's a because it's gotten worse. Let's talk
Hmm.
about this, because it's gotten worse over
Yeah.
the year, and it's like, you know what? I don't want to deal with you. I'm here to just do my work. But that's not what a work or a team environment is, because if you don't communicate, it's dead. So
Yeah.
do you purposely pick out the opposites when you put these teams together, or is it just potluck?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Someone yesterday asked me, "Do you walk around and analyze people all day?" And I said, "No, I don't. I'm not walking around and like, oh, that person has this style and this person has this style, right?" Um, I think I don't know. I think it's bringing all these people together and just doing your best to help them lean in with understanding and help them to see, you probably notice this as well, the different styles. Some of the styles may be a little more skeptical. It's just maybe in them, but some people have been hurt by leaders or by other people. And so, right, there's all these other layers. And that's why, especially when I'm doing the work that I do, I make sure I'm not putting people in boxes, right? I'm making sure I'm not saying, well, all S's are skeptical. And so they don't build trust as quickly as an I, or for example, because it's not just about our letter and our style,
Quick
it's about our
quickly
experience.
define so people know what you're talking about when you say D's,
Yeah.
I, S, and C. What are those categories?
Yeah. So the D are those people in our lives who are a little more dominant and they're direct. We see them, they have this presence to them. What is your style, by the way? So I'm an ISSI. I say both because I've done my assessment a few years ago, and when I did it, it said SI. But as I'm starting to grow and learn, I'm like, yeah, I think my I is starting to move up there a lot more. Um,
I'm a DI, but most
you're a
people that
TI.
know me say you don't seem like a D.
Mm.
So
It's cool because, and again, going back to the putting the people in the box, when I just said the D, direct, dominant, driven, results focused, we may look at someone like that and go, ooh, that person's scary, right?
mm.
And that's not the case. Most of the DIs that I know are so lovely, so kind, just like you, right? And that's why it's important that we don't label. But it's that understanding. The I style is very influential and inspiring, and they're fun and they're outgoing, right? They really want to make everyone around them have a great time. And then the S's, they're more of a steady and team player, and they're the glue that holds families and teams together. They're very reliable and loyal. And then we have our C styles who love numbers and they're data driven and they are systematic and calculating. But I say that with caution because I know people who have all those styles who don't have those characteristics, right? Who are very different than what I just described. And that's because you have all these other experiences and lenses and filters and things that have happened in your life, again, that will inhibit you to trust, or will that you make you really trustworthy and quick to trust other people, right? And that's why I say we really need to get the human that's in front of us, not just the worker. And it's beyond just these assessments that we do and, these team building days that we do once a year. It needs to be more than that.
Well, I noticed too, when you give an assessment out and they get it, they tend to not look at where the growth could be. They just label themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit more about that when you get assessments, because they could change throughout the year. The importance of not labeling yourself and the importance of knowing who you are and who you could be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very important point because, again, going back to what I was saying about putting people in a box and your assessment on the front of mine, it says SI. And that could allow me to go, well, I don't have D's. I'm not direct, so I'm not going to be direct. Or, I'm not great at organizing, so I'm just not going to, I'm just an SI. Or, and it's important that we don't do that. We don't want to label ourselves based on that because, as I was saying, we're complex human beings, and it's more than just those letters. But when I'm going through their assessments, I'm really looking for, where are you really strong? Where are the areas that you really thrive and shine? And I like to take the perspective of strengths versus let's see where you're not doing well and improve that. I think, let's look at what you're doing well and let's improve that. Focus on the strength, and then how can you lean into that strength even more so you can show up as a better teammate, or you can show up as a better spouse, or you can show up as a better parent. Use the gifts that you have versus going right to those areas that are maybe limitations for your style.
So it doesn't mean you
how I
can't.
approach it.
So that means you build upon your strengths, but
Mm-hmm.
you shouldn't ignore where you could have possible growth.
No, definitely. But I think we have the most areas of growth in our areas of strength,
Talk to
not
me
in our
about that.
areas of weakness.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so we've been trained our entire lives to improve on our weaknesses. Growing up in school, you're not good at math, get a tutor, do more math. But really, at the end of the day, all of us have things that we're maybe just not good at.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't great at math. It's not an excuse for me to not put effort into it. However, it's also not an opportunity for me to go and spend hours and hours and hire a tutor to do it to see a small improvement. Whereas if I was really, really great at art growing up, it's kind of like, oh, you're already good at art, so you don't need to put more time and attention there. But if we direct our energy towards the areas that we're already strong in, we're going to grow the most in that area because we already have the synaptic energy and everything there already. So we grow even more and we're able to reach our potential. When we talk about people reaching their potential or the gifts that they have, then we should be directing them to those gifts. But we're often directing people away from them. So I'm not saying if I'm not good at a certain skill that I shouldn't try and maybe, be better at it. But what I am saying is we need to spend more time putting our focus and our energy in the areas that we're actually already good at so that we can become even better at that. And I mean, John Maxwell talks about that, right? He's a great communicator, and yet he still works on his communication skills every day.
Isn't that amazing?
You're thinking, why are you doing that? Because he gets this concept.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You continue to build on your area of strengths. Then you bring your best contribution into the world. And then you bring people alongside you that are good at the areas that you're not good at. And that's how you make a really great, strong team.
Well, I think leaders do that to some of their
Mhm.
people. They disable them because they, what they're really good in, rather than keeping them there, they're like, well, you know where you lack in, you need to go over here and learn it. And they
Yes.
struggle.
Yes.
So what's the message to leaders out there? How could they better see the value in someone's strength rather than their weakness?
Well, the thing, so if anyone's ever listened to Marcus Buckingham or even, Patrick Lencioni, they talk a lot about work that brings you joy, right? Doing work that you love. And when a leader is moving people away from the things that they're really good at, and putting together personal development plans at the end of the year or the beginning of the year for them to improve in areas that they're not strong in, that's a recipe for burnout. That's a recipe for someone no longer loving the work that they do. So, I mean, just imagine at the beginning of the year if you sat down with every one of your teammates and you said, what brings you the most joy in the work that you do here? What do you love? And they start talking about that thing and you just watch them light up, right? And they're good at that. And then imagine you put all the people on your team in roles that they're really good at and also brings them joy. Right? I'm not saying that they're never going to do things that they don't love. You're going to have to do things you don't love, but if you started moving people around and developing plans around the areas they're already strong in, your team is like dynamite because everyone's doing the thing that they were meant to be doing. Um, and you have a team of, yeah, rock stars.
Well, it's funny because I've been doing a I've been reading a lot of emotional emotional books, and I cry. No, I've been reading a lot of motivational books,
Hmm.
and they all seem to say the same thing. And and talking to people that wrote those books, all really got most of their material from the Bible. I said, hey,
Hmm.
you know what? I'm going to go back to the Bible and read some of those teachings that Jesus
Yeah.
gave. Man, did he have a dysfunctional team, if you
Yes.
look at it that way. You know,
Yes.
especially even watching The Chosen, how
Yes.
he picked everyone individually for their
Mm,
strength. And
yes.
they fought amongst each other quite a bit. Whether you believe or not, we're not getting into faith here, but let's talk
Yeah.
about it. This is one of the greatest CEOs that thousands of years ago. His book is still number one.
Yes.
He's run the greatest. He's been the greatest influencer because
Mm,
he's still being taught his message and his influence that he taught his dysfunctional disciples, who went out there and really made it happen and spread the word. But a lot of people always think, man, if there were more people like me,
mhm.
what do you think would happen if everybody was just like you on your team?
Yeah.
What would
And it's a beautiful thing when there are people like there's nobody on this planet like you. And that's the beautiful thing, right? If we said, oh, I wish everyone was like me, well, I think there'd be a lot of chaos. For example, if we had a whole team of really driven, results oriented, focused people who just try to get to the finish line, well, who would take care of the people, right? You can't just have one type of person on the team. You need a complete collection of people that have unique gifts and talents and perspectives and thoughts. Like when we're talking about diversity, we're not just talking about the color of skin. We're talking about how people think. We're talking about how people act. Like it has to be everything, right? And so, yeah, you as a leader, you can get into the habit of hiring people just like you or hiring people completely opposite to you. But what about hiring for the specific task or the specific strength or
Mhm.
right? Like when you start bringing your team together like that and really understanding the gifts of the people on your team, it's just a totally different game. And I mean, I was watching my sister-in-law. She teaches our children's our school grade 7 and 8 band, and they had a little performance last week, and I was watching her, and she just came alive. I mean, she is brilliant at music. She teaches the kids, but when I saw her leading the band, it was like a totally different person came out of her. She was living her strength. She was doing something that she was born to, and I told her that I was like, you just became a totally different person. start paying attention to that, to people on your team, right? When does someone all of a sudden they perk up, they get excited, they get in the groove, they're in flow, and they're doing that thing, and you're just watching them in awe? You want them to do more of that. You don't want to go, Tessa, you're really great at that, but I need you to go spend 6 hours learning this thing that you're not good at. Why?
Well, I think people also are so focused on the title.
Yeah.
They want a title, and a title means a responsibility that you have to, accomplish, that you have to get done, and that might not be your strength. You can be just as brilliant in not having that title, but managing the certain, like you said, leading a band rather than
Mm-hmm.
playing the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
The conductor is so important. So how do we let people know that it's not about the title? How do we get them, as if I was one of the people sitting in your audience, to look within myself and see my brilliance, but not the titles that I'm after?
Well, that's interesting because I think different people will be motivated for different things, right? There are people who they want the title, and they're going to work for the title. I think of a lot of corporate positions. You don't move, you can't get promotions, or you can't move up financially unless you move up to a different title position, right? And I've spoken to some of these people who say, I don't want the title. Yes, I'd love to be compensated, and do that work. But oftentimes they love what they're already doing, but they can't move up, or they can't do anything else unless they move to a different title, unless they move to a different position. So I think from a corporate perspective, we just need to change how we do things in general. If someone wants that title and that's what motivates them, okay. But there are a lot of people who will do things without the title, who don't need the title. And again, that's why it's understanding, what do your people need, what motivates them to perform at their best, what type of recognition do they need. Is it a title, is it just constant affirmation or encouragement? um, I think this is the hard part, because we don't have time to get to know our people. That's what people will say. I don't have time to get to know my people. Well, then maybe you shouldn't be leading people.
I love that
Right?
because I hear that a lot. I'm too busy.
Too busy.
Too busy for what? Are
Hmm.
you trying to develop your people, spend time with them to, guide them and grow them and bear the great fruits, so that you can get rid of? This weekend I spoke to some of my team staff members in Louisiana, and I asked them to be the vine dresser.
Hmm.
Take care, because you're growing this great plant that bears so much great fruit, but yet you have to clean the weeds around it. You have to get rid of dead branches, even though you try to revive it. If you can't. Um, and I did something unusual. I got rid of the high title, because the
Okay.
managers who manage their departments should be responsible, but they like pointing the finger to the person with the highest title. And so I did is I wiped that title and said, now you all are responsible for your department. Was that a good move? Is that a new way of thinking?
I don't know. My very first book that I read when I started my leadership journey was a book called The Leader Who Had No Title by Robin Sharma. Have you read that book?
No, sounds interesting.
It's so good. Robin Sharma, um, he wrote, he was a monk, and he just, that book just, for me, that book really described leadership. How John talks about is not a position, right? Leadership is not a position. Leadership is influence. Robin took the perspective too that, you can lead from anywhere. You can be, and it's a story of a maid, someone cleaning a hotel room, and yet that person is leading from the hotel room. They are the CEO of that job. And I think if we just all, worked our positions from that perspective where I am the CEO of this, and how, titles don't mean anything.
Sure do.
Title is, but again, there are some people who need and want that title.
How about
The
human?
more people I talk to, it's a very small amount of them, though. Small amount of people, but there are people who still want that. If that makes them, feel better, then great. Here's your title. But I think we're starting to see a shift where titles are just they're not what they used to be.
No, title used to mean something important. Now they mean entitlement.
I
For
love
you,
that.
where you took somebody who was brilliant at what they did and you said, okay, I'm going to make you this title because you're a great influencer. But soon as they got the title, they turned into a dictator,
Mm-hmm.
a boss, you know, because I don't know if they felt the pressure or if they felt entitled because they
Yeah.
stopped doing what made them so brilliant. And then they wonder why sometimes you coach them and say, I'm taking the title from you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, um, I just struggle with that as new things are changing. But I love the fact that you're gathering people together, companies, because you're brilliant at this. You're creating teamwork. What do you say has been the most effective in bringing them together and understanding each other?
It's been using disc for sure, hands down. Being able to just take some time to understand the different people that are in this world. Slowing down. I think it's just, the most effective thing is being in that room, slowing down, understanding yourself, understanding other people, the awareness that we're all different, right? The awareness that we're not all going to be good at the same thing. We're not all going to do things the same way. And if we can engage in that, right? It's not just I did this workshop one day last year. That's what typically happens with this, but continue to engage in the learning, get back into that assessment, use the language. Then you can see changes, you can see understanding, but you have to want to do it. And people need to be willing to do the work. It takes time.
Does take time and it takes patience.
It takes patience.
And I agree.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't have the patience. It's I feel repetitive. Um, because I'm like, where's common sense gone? You know,
Yeah.
because common sense isn't common anymore. But this helps out in families, the disc,
Mm-hmm.
very
Mm-hmm.
much so, because I even tell people, in marriage, opposites tend to separate and leave each other
Mm-hmm.
because they're not understanding each other's, uh, behavior or
Right.
needs or wants. But once they learn each other's behaviors, they can actually complete each other
Yeah.
because one is stronger in the other. So, do you have a lot of your leaders who you represent in these things um, take a good look at themselves in the disc as well? Because
Yeah.
everything starts at the top. You know that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everyone goes through it together, right? The leader is in there with the team, and everyone is willing to share and be vulnerable, understand, what brings them joy, what motivates them, what makes them different, how they respond, how they react. And everyone has to engage in that together. It definitely cannot just be the team that does it and the leaders, sitting there watching. Everyone has to be engaged in that for sure.
Yeah, because I notice
And
most leaders sit back and they're like, I don't need this. I already know. That's why I'm a leader.
yeah, well, you know what? I Most of the teams that I work with, I am really surprised how open these leaders are to wanting to learn about their team and grow their team. I'm just really blessed to be able to work with some incredible organizations, and it's just really it's a joy for me to be able to share this stuff. But I learn from them, and I get to see the different personalities, and again, they all show up different, right? Although there's four letters and maybe there's only a certain amount of combinations, there's combinations within those combinations. And it's so fascinating to me, being able to see all these different styles show up very differently, even though they're the same two letters. Or and I think that's why I like it so much, because at the end of the day, I think the greatest fear across the board is, like I said when we started, is being misunderstood. And if we don't do the work of being able to understand the people in front of us, then we're just going to walk around misunderstood, and we're not going to be able to bring
And
the
it's not
best out
just
of
about
people.
us in the disc, because once we understand who we are and we understand who you are, there's a part of that disc that explains how to work with that different personality, how they like to be
Yeah.
approached, how they like to be talked to. But it also talks about how you like to be talked to and approached. So I think once, am I right? By sharing that, you can get better communication. How's that work?
Yeah, definitely. Exactly that, right? And taking it off the paper, because sometimes it's like there's a whole bunch of things written there and you're like, well, I don't really mind that. I'm okay with that. So it's getting them to voice, what do you prefer? How do you want to be communicated to, right? How do you respond if someone's coming at you in a confrontational way? Some people have no problem with it. Other people shut down, right? And so you're right. It's understanding all those ways of connecting with people who are very different than you, and then just constantly engaging in that, because we see disengagement all the time in organizations, in families. I mean, we see it, and it really comes down at the end of the day, just take a moment and understand that person in front of you. It's not about you, right? Even when they're reacting, it's typically not about you. Um, but if you're not taking the time to understand that, then it can create real
Do
issues.
you think some
For
people
sure.
go to work and, well, they obviously bring their personal baggage, you know,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, and take it out on other people. But I think sometimes too they forget that we can agree to disagree, and this is
Yes.
work. It's not the voting polls. It's not, the news.
Yeah.
They tend to bring all that outside influence that will work them against each other, rather than what is the mission and the culture and the system of the company, so they can work together. Yes, you're going to agree to disagree, but we can work together for the better good of the organization.
Yeah. And again, like I just, I keep saying understanding because it's so important. Even what you're saying right now, right? We can have totally different perspectives, but it's like that beach ball. It's just turning that ball. So let me understand where you're coming from, right? Just even hearing someone out that has a different opinion doesn't mean I have to change my thoughts. We're not saying you have to start thinking like everyone on your team, but giving people the opportunity to at least voice their perspective so you can understand where they're coming from, and then go, okay, yeah, I see your perspective. I still don't agree with maybe how you're thinking about this, but that's okay. I respect you as a teammate, right? And I think that's important too. We're not trying to conform here. We're not trying to turn everybody into robots where we all think the same or we have to think the same, or really we want conflict on the team. We want people to challenge healthy conflict. But when we talk about trust, that's another question I'll ask. Is there conflict on your team? And they're usually afraid to answer that, right? They're like, is this a trick question? It's like, if you don't have conflict on your team, that is a sign of a lack of trust.
Mm.
Because if you trust one another, you will challenge one another. You will disagree with one another in a respectful way. You will be willing to see their perspective and go, that's a cool perspective. Still don't agree with you, but thank you for sharing. And you're able to walk away knowing that you are valued, you are heard, you are seen, and ultimately you are understood, whether we agree or not when we leave that room. If we have all of that in place, then you're able to bring all these different viewpoints and experiences and everything with you, knowing that you have a seat at that table and people are still going to honor you and respect you.
Yeah, and I love attorneys, because they'll get at the same table in a deposition or whatever, and they cut each other down to nothing. But when
Mm-hmm.
they're done, they leave it in that room. And it's funny because they leave that room and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing for lunch?" "Oh, I was gonna cook." "Oh, what are you doing?" And all of a sudden, you're like, "Wait a minute, you guys were killing each other, and now you're gonna go out and have lunch with each other." I think that people would leave their emotions, like you said, and just take it for what it's worth. And if you agreed, you agreed. If you disagreed, you disagreed, but you got your voice out.
You got your voice out. And I think that's the most important. When we talk about trust, I think that's the important thing. People want to be seen, heard, valued, and really at the end of the day, understood. If you want to build
Directly,
trust,
not by others, meaning when you
absolutely.
go talking to other people about you, that's not
Yes.
good. But if I come
No.
directly to you and have it out with you, it ends up more in love than
Yeah,
it does in
absolutely.
hate and anger.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's okay. You can be like hurt by that, but people are going to respect one another more if they're like, wow, you actually just came and told me that. And I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Right.
it might hurt its sting at the moment, but at least they were, brave enough to come directly to you, because so many
Yeah.
people want to tell so many others, and they're not going to change the behavior unless they talk to that person directly. I
Mm-hmm.
wish all I know your time is very valuable and you have a lot of things to do, but I wish all our companies were like the beach ball, one big beach party where we can throw it around, have
Yes.
some music playing. But unfortunately, we have to have events like this. But
Mm.
unfortunately, I say unfortunately, but fortunately we do. And there are people out there like you who are willing to go out there and bring some awareness. Um, Before I go, what are your final thoughts of how a great team can come together, and what are some of the things that we can do to put whatever aside and get closer together?
Yeah, I'll really just getting back to what I've been saying is take the lens of understanding, right? It's being able to know that, hopefully everyone's coming to your team. They love the organization, right? They love the team. They're probably making the best decision and voicing their opinions and those types of things, right? From a place of love, I would hope that that's the case. And if we can just embrace the diversity in thoughts and, understanding where people are coming from, we can learn a lot from people. We're very much, we think our way is the only way, the best way. And that could be hard sometimes to allow other people to say, I don't really think that's right. You know, and if you can just take a moment and go, okay, my ego's getting, ego is a huge, is it Tessa getting hurt? Is it her ego getting hurt? Like, what's the problem here, right?
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, if we can just know that, if the team is coming together and they truly want to see the organization and the team succeed, that we should be willing to listen and hear other people out and their perspectives. Because I think John Maxwell might have said this, or one of the other mentors on Maxwell Leadership, but it's not always our idea that has to win. It's the best idea that
Love
should
that.
win,
I love that.
right?
It's not
So I think that's a great approach as a team. It's not
not
my idea.
my idea, but the best idea. I love
Mhm.
that. I love
Yeah.
that because it's so true. You are just an amazing, amazing
Oh,
person.
you're too
And
kind.
no, 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 no. You do a lot of, and you work
Mhm.
hard. I see your posts on LinkedIn, and you're always out there influencing, transforming, and making a difference in many organizations and many people's lives. But if somebody wants your service, to come in and kind of do those team buildings or do personal coaching with you, how do they get in contact with you?
My website is just my name. So you can reach me at tessacampen.com or my email, which is the same, tessa@tessacampen.com. Always happy to chat. But yeah, you can find me on social as well. Like you said, LinkedIn, just Tessa Campen.
If you want to do yourself a favor and your organization great justice, these are the type of
Mhm.
people like Tessa that you need to come in and bring that team together and unite them for the better good of the organization. Because in times like this that we've been through, where this evolution has kind of drawn us apart, and we need to come closer together. So, Tessa, I thank you so much for your time,
Mhm.
your brilliance. I could go on forever and ask you a plethora of questions, but like I said, I know you're very busy and time is of the essence for you. So, hopefully, another show we can really pick your brain a little bit more. But keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you
Oh,
so much.
thank you for having me on.
And guys, thank you for being on the Julio Show today. And I hope we can bring you more information like this. I know we're teasing you and we're giving you little bits of food, but hopefully we're feeding you something so that you can be hungry for more. because if you're not, you're always going to be hungry or you're going to starve. So we'd like to feed you little bites at a time. Tessa, thank you so much. Have a great day. You all have a great day, and God bless.